Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Dorothy Lucci, like Chris said, and I'm here with Gabe, who is going to tell us about the Community Choice Aggregation and this global renewable energy model. And I want to say that I met Gabe at this event, and there was a really interesting conversation about the possibilities that are there in renewables, in gaining traction and actually bringing them to the consumer versus having policies and insights as to how important sustainability is. So our fireside chat last week was about sustainability and the circular economy. And this week it is about how do we bring in these renewables? How do we actually do this? What are the lessons? What are the possibilities that exist here from very knowledgeable source? And so I welcome you to
Thank you.
Our fireside chat, Gabe. Do you want to say something about you, maybe your background, how you
Sure.
came into this space?
You know, like I always joke, my path wasn't a straight line. It was very jagged with some, left turns, right turns. But so I began my career in the United States Army. I did a short tenure in the military. Unfortunately, had a discharge for a medical reason, and I had to figure out what was another pathway to serve my nation and my community. And I found, public policy, kind of government relations is that space. So I transitioned from a military role to working in the U.S. House of Representatives on energy public natural resources. So that included energy, that included water. So I began to, learn kind of from a policy and, legislative standpoint, how to, regulate energy, water, and natural resources. From there, I wanted to come back to my home state of California. So I ended up working in the California state legislature, where I specifically worked for a member who was working on natural resources issues. And then from there, I did a transition into the private sector, where I was the legislative director for the California Association of Mutual Water Companies during a very challenging time in our history, where PFAS was a contaminant that had come out showing that it had carcinogens in our water. It was almost in communities across the state, and we had to figure out, like, how do we fund the removal of PFAS from our communities and our water supply. So I was a big part of the team that negotiated to use some of the greenhouse gas fund to mitigate that. So that was eye-opening to me. That was a process that brought together the private sector, the NGOs, non-government organizations, and the government to build solutions. And I realized I liked that. And fast forward, I saw an opportunity at the Orange County Power Authority where really could get to the ground level and engage with folks and help them figure out, like, how can we make renewable energy accessible, because we know that we have a climate crisis, and the Orange County Power Authority is a big part of that solution, community choice aggregation. And I think with that we can get into the presentation.
Yeah. So I guess for our listeners to understand, because there's so many different systems out there in the world, I want to say, in the US system specifically, the challenges are that we have a process of making policy changes that is very difficult, because there is, voting at every step, and there has to be agreement across the board, right? And so, so for our viewers and our listeners, I just want, maybe if you could spend like a couple of minutes just explaining exactly how, how you bring this together into an actionable package.
Sure. I think it'd be helpful to
have the yes, the slides.
So as I speak, they can have a visual of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, because so the reason why we're taking a step back into that is because there's a complexity to it that comes from having to get agreement on the different aspects. That's loading. There we go. That there has to be agreement in the system on how you're going to move forward. And there has to be agreement all the way from the communities to state government, all the way to, I want to say national government.
Sure.
Sure. So
let's start with talking about what community choice aggregation is and kind of what we do at OCPA. We can go to the next slide, possible. All right, so let's address what the problem is here, right? I think we know that energy is at the heart of climate change, meaning, it's pretty apparent that we've seen a lot of change in our climate here locally here in the West. We've been hotter summers than we've ever had before, which is something I think we've all experienced. We're seeing an increase in wildfires. But, with all these challenges we're having, there is a solution, and energy is the key to that solution, and specifically renewable energy. And that's what community choice aggregation is all about. We're all about the procurement of renewable energy, getting that onto the grid, and being able to disseminate that to households and businesses. Go to the next slide here. So let's talk about like high level what a community choice aggregation is. Before I jump into that, let's talk about how it was formed. Going back to your initial question, talking about how you have the tangential relationship between government, private business, and the local level. So essentially, community choice aggregation, kind of, I look at this as kind of what happened with Enron, kind of the fallout of when you have an energy monopoly. In 2000, the state assembly decided to institute legislation called Assembly Bill 117. What that did was create the policy framework for local governments to form joint power authorities for energy, right? So you could create a local, essentially energy economy through allowing local cities to come together and say, hey, we want to form a local agency that prioritizes the procurement of energy. And, at OCPA, we have a focus on renewable clean energy. So why is this uniquely important? What this has done is this has allowed local communities to have control over energy, where historically you've had large IOUs that adhere to a board of directors, which isn't really, communicating directly to the community stakeholders of any kind. Also, what I like about CCAs is because we have this not-for-profit status, we really invest all of our revenues into beyond the procurement of energy, of course, our staff, but into customer and community programs. There's examples of this across CCAs, whether it's investment in EV charging stations, whether it's investments in microgrid technology, whether that's investment in community grant programs for something that could be here on campus on, promoting entrepreneurs who want to get into expand the green economy or work in that space. But uniquely, what I like, which is going to be a big theme, and I think especially valuable to our students here in China, is this created a methodology for decentralizing energy away from kind of a national top-down model, but through local generation. So a bottom-up model, as I see it, which really has direct impact on, local communities.
I just want to ask a quick question, because I can see, so normally the live transcriptions. So normally you go and you'd be able as a customer to purchase energy from a local company, right? Electrical company, like in the US. So what you guys are doing on a very simple level is giving the customer, the consumer, an option to buy renewable energy. Is it on top of having like a normal company as a competitor, normal, quote unquote?
Sure.
Or is it aggregated, just for the the audience to understand, like, okay, so I come in as a consumer, I have like these choices, I say, okay, no, I pick you guys because we know that you bringing in renewable energy, so then I don't think about it anymore. Easy peasy?
Sure. There's a lot to unpack there. And I think that's an exceptional question. First off, like if everyone could focus in on the image that's on this slide and how this works. So traditionally, the investor-owned utilities, in our case here locally in California, the company we use is Southern California Edison. So if you look at the image here, you'll see that it says energy delivered by the utility company. Historically, the energy was sourced by the utility company, then transmitted to the transmission line. And then as you can see, it goes to the commercial business or the resident. So uniquely here, I think what, community choice aggregation, specifically here in Orange County, OCPA is, we are buying that renewable energy on behalf of the customer. We are partnering with the investor-owned utility who own their transmission lines to get that to the households and individuals. Okay. So for the second part of your question, you asked me is like, how is this different, right? So this is different because historically, consumers didn't have choice, right? But now they do because of this option. So the way it works, just so everyone can understand, is now if a local jurisdiction decides that, hey, we want our community to have more energy options, that your local city council, in your case, that your domicile would vote that they want to have a CCA as an option, meaning you're automatically enrolled into the CCA. So now you have an option to opt out of it. But what it does is it gives you more choice. And if you were to go to the next slide, there's an example, I believe, of these choices. So, okay, maybe it's the next slide, but anyways, I'll still highlight over this, like what is the benefit? And I think I touched on it earlier, is local control. Your local community has control over your energy. It creates local jobs, which I think is value to our entrepreneurs. And then it also promotes local reinvestment and addresses climate change. And we can jump to the next slide. Next slide. So right here, so I was talking about now you have more choice through the CCA model. And in the case for residents here locally in Orange County, we offer a tiered renewable energy option, which has 3 plans. And the reason why we wanted to offer 3 plans is because everyone's sort of at a different level financially and what they're willing to invest in with respect to renewable energy. So we start with what we call our basic choice rate, which although it's actually 3% less than the investor-owned utility, and that's a win, right? Because now, folks can get renewable energy at a price point that is economical for their household. And let's say you want more, you can move up to Smart Choice, which is 72% renewable energy. And then, of course, if you want 100% renewable energy on the grid, you get that option. And it's just the difference of really from our basic choice to the 100 renewable choices, like the cost of a Starbucks coffee. So it's not even an exorbitant amount of money you're investing to have 100% renewable energy. And that wasn't an option. And it's an option that the IOUs do not currently have available to the community. So we're very proud of that. Does that answer your mostly?
Yeah. So they have to pay a little bit more when you say that's per kilowatt hour. But then, and it's hard to say this. So what would be the difference, let's say, from a normal bill of a household of like 4 people per month, using this method versus a normal bill using the Edison method?
Sure. I love that answer because I feel like it's a winning, commodity for us. So if you were looking at like an average 425 kilowatt per hour customer, which I think is about the average at the 100 renewable energy rate, you're looking at like $4, maybe $5 and some change, just depending on their usage and like what the rates are at that time. Again, that's pretty much how many people spend like $5. Like you go through a Starbucks drive-through, you're spending that. So that investment is like the amount of impact you can make your Starbucks coffee, invested capital into your energy bill, you can make a pretty huge impact on the environment.
Yeah, so this is great. So last week we had a conversation around values, right? So it's a little bit like understanding what one's own values are and living according to those.
Sure.
And there was a question last week about eco-psychology and transpersonal psychology and how do they match up, with these topics that we're discussing. And again, this is coming up, is if there is somebody whose values are aligned with this. It gives them the chance to get involved, and there's agency here, which from a psychological perspective means that there's less stress on people. And it actually allows people to live their values fully versus feeling at the mercy of, you know, bigger government or whatever it is, and everybody does something else with it, or the forces of nature, or, you know, everybody in the world is doing it wrong, and like, what am I going to do? Which then causes a lot of stress. So in this way, then you're giving them the possibility for not so much money, I want to say, right? To live according to their values.
Well, and to chime in about that, Gabe is wonderful about helping us procure 100% green energy commercial customers, and we call them green pioneers. We give them the opportunity to promote that on their business so that consumers can choose that business because it lives with their values, as you're alluding to.
Right.
We have one customer that just recently became a green pioneer, and in a single month saw, it was a yoga studio that saw 40 new customers come in because, and they're attributing it to that decal, because to your point, they're getting to, not just in their daily life, but when they're doing other things in the community, be able to live out their values. So
yeah, and just
that's a huge point.
Sure. And just to reiterate that, I don't know if everyone caught that. So what we offer is, this is a offering to our commercial businesses. There was a study by Deloitte that articulated that businesses that don't prioritize ESG over the next, you know, several decades, they're going to start losing business, because that has been proven to be a value priority for consumers. So what we're doing is we're encouraging commercial business in the region who are at the 100% renewable plan. We're helping them promote their business through marketing, through PR efforts, through giving them, many of you are probably familiar with the LEED certification, you know, decal that goes on businesses that are meet those standards. We have what we call our Green Pioneer badge, which is a showcase to that. And our customers are, you know, letting us know that, hey, we're seeing an increase in business because people want to spend their capital on a business that prioritizes and focuses on the climate and the community.
Yeah, that's great. It's a great way to bundle it. Chris, is there something like a LEED certification in China? So so LEED certification means basically that you're complying at the highest level with all the building codes for renewables and for green energy when you're building a building, right? So it's construction and architecture, really. And there's it's very hard to get. It's like the top of the line. And to be able to receive this is like a very big deal. So I just want to explain that, you know, for our Asian audience, that there is this that exists that then positions buildings, and you'll get a nice little plaque on your building that then lets everybody know that this is LEED certified. And yeah, and everybody, no, there's not. I thought so, but so there is this certification that exists not only in the US, it is also in Europe, if I'm not mistaken, and it's like in the UK. And I think that's as far as it's gotten. I don't know, is it in Africa or South America? South America, maybe, or Central. Well, so it's like it is here. It's a good start. And so we're working step by step. Anything else you want to add to that in terms of LEED certification and how? No, okay.
I just wanted to mention, when you mentioned eco-psychology,
yes,
Catherine Hayhoe is a climate scientist who says that 50% of people are very concerned about climate change, but only 8% are activated, and a lot of them are not activated because they don't know what to do.
Yes,
we give them an instant thing to do.
Yes,
easy to do and affordable.
That's right. So from this eco-psychology perspective, you know, when we look at it from what we specialize in, transpersonal psychology, is just that if there's a disconnection from the environment, whichever way it is, there's also a disconnection from your own internal environment. And that then always causes some sort of mental health imbalance, right? And so maybe we're not quite sure where it's coming from or where this malaise is coming. We're like, we're not okay, right? So And there's many layers to it. So, okay, we can say you spend maybe the weekend going for a hike. That's part of the
Sure.
reconnection, right? But
Yeah.
maybe that's not enough. And to your point, not knowing is the worst part. So it requires more, definitely more
Absolutely.
education.
Yeah, and we're here to do all
Yeah,
that.
that's what we do. Okay, next slide.
Yes, please.
Okay.
So, I'm all about tooting our horn, and that's something that's really important to me. So, over the last year, since we launched, 2 billion pounds of CO2 emissions have been reduced through our renewable energy procurement here at OCPA. So this is indicative to the Orange County market. So what most people is that's 221,000 gas-powered vehicles off the road. I always like to joke that, hey, with that, we're on track to do better than the state as an agency. That's 40 million bags, recycling 40 million bags of trash. And then it's if we planted 15 million tree seedlings grown over 10 years. I really like that one because I'm like, man, that would be a lot of work. So I'm glad we can do that through our energy procurement. We can go to the next slide. So let's transition here and kind of talk about this from like a global perspective and talk about, I'll start with talking about like the US sustainability goals and how community choice aggregation is a part of that. So here in the US, we have a net zero carbon emission goal by 2050. And that's what we're working for here. Why I think, and I want to talk about CCAs, because I think the fastest way to get to that place is through decentralization on our energy decisions by giving local governments and communities the option of renewable energy. And that's what CCAs are doing specifically. Here, from the federal perspective, the Inflation Reduction Act is kind of the conduit leading to energy models that are enabling solar and wind installations to double by 2028. And then also something that I think is really important that CCA models have allowed renewable energy adoption to outpace fossil fuel dependency in several states. And it looks like, and it shows in 2022, US investments in low carbon energy reached $141 billion. You can go to the next slide here. So here's what's interesting. So what I'm going to do here is a little compare and contrast between China and the US here.
Great.
So right now, China has a net zero goal by 2060 here. Right now, they've made heavy investment in wind and solar, about 546 billion as of 2022. But what's interesting is their operation is a government-led initiatives, which, to applaud China has made them the largest producer of renewable energy, but they still have a challenge because of their utilization of coal. So there's a polluting element to their energy model where, what I'm proposing here is through decentralization, implementation of the community choice aggregate model would help them transition to renewables by powering local communities and local domiciles to purchase energy, which is something that's not happening in their country, which, the US provides, I think, a pretty adequate case study. And what that would look like is local initiatives that would ensure community engagement. Because right now, kind of looking at the model, it's kind of like a top down, here's what we've done on your behalf. There's not a lot of communication coming from like local jurisdictions and local business. They're basically being mandated on what actions to take, which, might be a reason why they haven't been able to reduce the carbon potentially. Yeah.
Well, I think it's a whole, there's a whole discussion there, right? I mean, for example, in the Chinese market, what is remarkable is that they've moved so much to EV vehicles, right? So they have a much stronger, I'd say market orientation in that way. Also, they're much cheaper, so a lot more people can get them. And I think there's still not quite sure how to bring it together. So to your point, that could be really interesting to do this grassroots level approach. Or yes, in China, and also I think maybe Europe would be more friendly to that as well. I'm surprised that there's not more of that in Europe. Question mark? Do you guys know about that?
They do. They have
this system. In Scandinavia, they do. So that model, this community model has been used in Scandinavia. Yeah, because I know that in the German market, they haven't used it this way. It still does come, but I mean, there's a very strong emphasis on renewables. And also because they've had to, because their pipeline for energy from Russia has, been compromised. So basically everybody was sitting around in really warm sweaters, during the last winters.
Sure.
And so then, they want to offset, as well into this, but I think their model is slightly different than this one. But yeah, great point that might be, when you're looking at doing it, that might be like a really interesting model to propose or look at.
Sure.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about the pitfalls. But I'll leave that for later.
We'll get there. So here's just a comparative slide, decentralized versus centralized models. I had already articulated that the US has a decentralized energy market empowering local governments through CCAs, as we discussed, whereas China is centralized, which means it's a top-down approach. But the consequence of that, from our observation, it's led to a reliance on coal, which has kind of slowed rapid decarbonization. In addition, we have seen, US model, because of the decentralization, has had faster growth than China's approach to focus on like large scale infrastructure. And then I think what's really incredible here is just CCAs offer flexibility through local investment innovations. And we feel like China has very diverse regions. So like this one glove fits all approach probably isn't the best way to do it, where you could custom and create, models like these in the different provinces that fit the needs of those individual communities, which, I think would be absolutely powerful. So for, citizens of China. So,
yeah. No, I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
You want me to go to the next slide?
Sure.
Or
you can ask me questions.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, nuclear.
Nuclear energy. Oh man, like depending.
Right. So yeah. So does that in your mind like come into the mix at all here, or does it not? Do you want to stay well away from that? Like what is your
So this is always a tough question when you talk about nuclear energy. And although our agency doesn't have a like formalized position on nuclear energy, I will say this: there is a place for nuclear energy, depending on what agency, what market you're engaged in. I understand that the availability of nuclear energy could be a pathway to lower costs, because when you have mixed use of energy, that drives down energy costs. There is a place for that. Absolutely. So there's no, we don't have like a negative or a pro on that, but just depending on like who wants to use it. I mean, it's definitely an opportunity available. It is an energy source that can be used. Although, there's a lot of energy sources. So, I would always encourage the use of wind, solar, geothermal. There's also a question about hydroelectric. You can look at all these other energy sources. So you're not limited in nuclear, but I understand in certain communities, certain regions, nuclear is the option available. So at the end of the day, I think the reduction of the consumption of coal is the goal. So I think there's a place for mixed use of energy where necessary.
Yeah, to play with it. Yeah, excellent. The thought is also coming with, the advent of artificial intelligence and large language models and all the energy that they're using. Sure. And so this thought of bringing in nuclear has been attached to that model, just so as to reduce the sucking of energy from the grid in general.
Yeah.
So that was another thought that I had in my mind. Have you guys been involved with any of those centers?
Like with the nuclear sites?
No, just the providing renewable energy to maybe the centers. Yeah.
So I mean, on one hand, we do have businesses that operate artificial intelligence in Irvine. So given that we give energy to those businesses, yes, in a way, tangentially, we are contributing to the powering of AI systems. But to date, and Jackie, correct me if I'm wrong, we haven't necessarily work specifically
For a center.
for a center
Not from our awareness.
from our awareness.
But they do, to your point, use a lot of energy, so if
Yes.
there's an opportunity to have them using renewable energy, that's great.
Right,
You know,
that's,
because that would help decrease the carbon footprint. I know Linda probably knows a little bit more about those specifics. But
I was just gonna add that I think the US has invested 6 billion in nuclear and research, and we do see it as part of the answer because we need that baseline energy. There's investment in smaller nuclear, programs, so because that, when they're so large scale, the costs don't even weigh out. And I think along with that is the general population's acceptance of nuclear. And so, and when you have accidents like Fukushima and Chernobyl, which is why
Yeah, yeah.
China's not a big fan of it,
yeah.
you're also constantly needing to figure out how to communicate that. But we definitely need ways to handle all of the upcoming challenges we have with electricity. So I don't think any of us are closed to any idea, as we're doing the research. But right now, renewables are the cheaper option.
Interesting, yeah, because it is, it's a larger debate, that one. And it's interesting to see how, the next one is quantum computing, right? In which direction that is going. And it seems to also be like connected with the nuclear energy. So, I'm not sure exactly why that is. Is that just because there's a larger amount of kilowatts available faster, or, that
Yeah,
they're
that's-
attending, like, I mean, because the package that you're offering, technically speaking, should be competitive to this, right? Like very competitive.
Yeah, so I think we're competitive at 3 points. One is the availability of renewable energy, which currently isn't an option when you're working with our IOUs here. Two, competitive pricing. I think that's kind of gives us an edge there. And then thirdly, direct one-on-one community investment in our member cities, right? I think those are the 3 points, salient points that I offer why CCAs are unique. And why does this matter? Cities and local business can't always do it on their own. But when you have what I call the three pillars here of a government entity, local government, us being a JPA, and the private sector all working together to move in a direction towards renewable energy, that's the pathway of the future. That's how we're going to drive down costs of energy. That's how we're going to, which I think would be important to our students here, is that's how we're going to be able to support you in building a better energy economy where, VCs and capitalist companies, and you can get money to build a business that creates a solar farm or creates a, solar panels or creates microgrid technology to get more business and projects off the ground. All that is a tangential relationship.
Well, I'm actually thinking, it also creates a power play, right? So the moment you have this type of setup, that means that the power is evenly distributed within the community versus, power grids is really where it's at, especially with what we were discussing before. So then, from that perspective, this way of approaching it is giving the power back to the base on this level. And I guess my mind is going, okay, so then you could offer these packages to, budding AI companies or, LLMs as well, maybe in a different way. And that
Sure
would also be really cool.
and what you said to me is like extremely profound. And it's interesting because I was talking to another group of business students and they're like, hey, why don't we just everyone have direct access? And I'm like, okay, I mean, that would be exorbitantly more expensive. But what you pointed out to me is very powerful, right? You talked about coming back to the local level, getting energy to folks. So the cool thing, what I like about, because our model puts energy onto the aggregate and it's not like directly going into the lines of household, and people, there's contention on that. Some people have an opinion, but why that's so powerful is your investment is cleaning up the grid, is cleaning up our environment for everyone, right? So even those people who might feel like, hey, I'm a little reticent to go to 100% renewable energy, they're still benefiting from those who are, on the 100 renewable energy plan while they're still contributing their 44%. So everyone's sort of rowing together into have a cleaner environment, climate, and green economy. And I think that's something that a salient point that's very important about CCAs. And I think that's something that the students here in China can definitely take back to their local jurisdiction domiciles and have that conversation, how powerful it can be. You as an individual can reach out and work with your community to build something very similar.
Yeah, it's very powerful. And I think it's attractive in that way. Yeah. Chris, are there any questions?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
So first question is, how can consumer awareness and engagement, which are critical for the success of CCA programs, be fostered in other countries?
Yeah, I think that's really good. Man, so like threefolds coming here from my background as an organizer, I think this is how you get started. One, I think you need to get together a group in your community that says, hey, we want to see more renewable energy available in our community. Two, I'm more than happy to kind of share like how you form a CCA if that's needed, but you would go to your local jurisdictions, your governments, and say, hey, I need you to pass policy. Step one is getting a policy passed, right? So that's step two here is you organize a group that everyone's in favor of wanting to see community choice aggregation. Two, you'd probably write some kind of proposal or work with a group to help you build this proposal to share to your elected officials. And then thirdly, I'd encourage you to, I think a lot of movements happen on college campuses and you all are students. I think that's a powerful place to organize. We've seen most of the movements nationally happen on colleges and universities. So I encourage you to, talk with your professors, your cohorts, your students, and, start organizing from that point. I don't know if you all have anything you'd like to add.
Just wanted to mention that there's an organization called leanenergyus.org, and they are doing the first conference on community choice energy nationally.
Oh, really?
Or something.
I think it's October 12th. But people could go to leanenergyus.org, and there are some various models depending on each state is different, but that also will be something that happens internationally, I think, eventually, because it's really energy in the hands of the public is what they're talking about. And that looks a little bit different in every state. So that is one resource, and there might even be student
Sure.
rates for that.
Do you know that's accessible virtually?
I don't.
I'll look into it.
Two of our members from our team are going, so we will be writing up some summary.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Sure.
So I'm curious about it as well.
But with that, we're more than happy to share any learnings we have with your student audiences.
Yeah. And that just might be another way of doing it. You write up something or then
Sure.
send it to us so
Of
that
course.
we can share it out. Yeah, was that okay? Did you need any more details on that question?
I think that's okay, yeah.
Okay.
I think there's more questions.
Okay, go
How
ahead.
can public awareness and education about renewable energy be improved?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And, I'm going to look at myself because, I was not one of the first people to jump into the renewable energy space. And I was thinking like, oh man, how does a person like me coming out of like a different sector, learn more about renewable energy? So I think one is public forums are really important. I think organizing them and having them organized from 3 different vantage points, which means 3 different voices. One being non-governmental sector, nonprofits, which my colleague Linda knows all about. She's a climate champion here. Secondly, the policy, right? Because even though we have goals set forth by the community and non-government organizations, we need institutional policy to build basically the frame of the vehicle, right? That we're going to operate in. And then the last piece, I'm a big believer in the private sector in the sense of the private sector is going to bring projects online. So I really see the private sector and, you all studying as like MBA and business students, I think you're incredibly important because you're going to build the technologies that I think is the infrastructure that's going to go into the vehicle to drive it, right? Because without, these capital investments and the businesses and the startups and what you're organizing to get projects online, there won't be enough energy available if we wanted to see a worldwide, global implementation of CCA or renewable energy, right? Like this is all incredibly important. So I think all those pieces would put together would address that.
And also, what are the job creation opportunity associated with renewable energy industry?
Yeah, I'm gonna plug that one to you.
Good.
I was just gonna say, it's one of the most requested things we get when we reach out to schools. And by 2030, they predict 10% of jobs will be in clean tech. There is a huge shortage of workers in the field, and
Yeah.
that shortage is even
That's correct.
But it's anything from solar installers, solar engineers, storage technicians,
Yeah.
but also we're having, and we could say this in our own organization, people that understand policy, analysts, human resource specialists, community outreach managers like myself and Jackie. We there are many areas that people can work in the renewable energy field.
Yeah, it's funny because there's actually a term now that I was listening to the other day. You have blue collar, you have white collar, you have green collar.
Green collar, that's the
Right?
first.
So
I like
it's
that. I
like,
love
I
that.
mean,
Wow.
And that's really to speak to what you're saying. There is actually a huge jump, and I think we haven't quite wrapped our minds around, like, everybody's so busy with the AI and where that is taking us, but that is taking us there. And yes, so there's green collars now.
Now, I'll just add, because this was my experience, volunteer anywhere you can, get internships when you can, because that was my lead in, just volunteer in environmental groups, climate groups, in groups working in disadvantaged communities, because that transition is happening, where everyone's being included. So there are many, many opportunities to get into the field.
No, and again, so this idea of when you're in this type of field, really, looking at it from this transpersonal psychology perspective, or, eco-psychology, that really does entail living to these types of values. So, what are you going to do? And so if all the jobs are kind of shifting at the moment, globally, these are the jobs that are being opened up. So it's equally interesting. And of course, there's some other ones that are also really needed. But yeah, the green collar, I guess.
I think we're taking that one. Were there other questions?
Right now, no.
Okay,
Okay,
great.
all right, good.
Cool.
If you want
You
to
have a
continue.
question?
No, I always do, but
All
no.
right.
We'll
I
just-
love this. Is so great.
There we go.
Okay. So I think this is kind of packaging the emphasis on like CCAs here. So just to recap, so the students can understand is, so what did we learn from community choice aggregation? We learned that what it does is it empowers local governments and consumers and provides flexibility and control over energy sources. We believe countries can leverage local community engagement and tailor energy solutions to their regional needs, because not all CCAs have to operate exactly the same way. They can set their own goals and priorities. So again, not a top-down approach or a one-glove-fits-all approach. So also cultural adaptation is key. And I think that's what's really powerful, is that we're out in the community. Folks like myself and my colleague here, Linda, we're out there talking to people, understanding the uniqueness of each culture, especially here in Southern California. We are a melting pot of folks from all over the world, and everyone has a different perspective on how energy implementation should, be done, how information should be disseminated to their community, and more importantly, even educating them on how do I advocate if I want renewable energy, if it's in a jurisdiction that you're currently not serving. So being able to understand those nuances of the communities, and there's different ages, ranges, racial orientations, but the beauty of our model, it is so adaptable that we can serve those needs. And that's something that I think will be relevant in China, because there's a lot of nuances in culture there, depending on where you're from.
Yeah, so can you give like an example, like a real like pragmatic example, I want to say, of
Sure.
how it would be, for example, different in California than it would be. I think you have these on the East Coast as well, correct?
We do.
And so what would be like
So-
just an example, like how would it, be culturally so different in
Yeah.
approach?
So we could talk about Southern California. We have an abundance of solar energy because we get a lot of
Yeah,
sunshine.
okay.
A pragmatic example would be if you're in a market, I'm thinking not even just the East Coast. Let's say, for example, we moved up north and we went to like Seattle, where they don't get as much sunshine. That would impact the type of energy procurement they do
Okay.
and how they would build infrastructure. So I think that's a tangential example. But just to give one even more closer to home for our students here, let's look at Shanghai versus the rural provinces in China, right? Completely different needs, completely different infrastructure. So what would work in Shanghai definitely wouldn't work necessarily in the rural provinces. So I think again, CCAs create the opportunity to build infrastructure, build programs, build energy plans that fit the needs of those communities. So that's why CCA should be everywhere.
Yeah, no, but it actually makes sense.
Yeah.
So what are the pitfalls in that?
Oh man, the pitfalls. Okay, tough question. I'm skipping over that. No, I'm just kidding. Pitfalls. There's nothing bad about CCAs. If I'm going to be honest, the pitfalls what CCAs probably would come from, I think outside of the business model, it could be maybe folks not understanding necessarily what we are,
Yeah.
and I think misinformation is probably the devil's always in the details in a sense, right? Some people
Yep,
don't
yep.
understand how we operate. Folks don't understand why there's a need when we've had a utility for 100+ years, Southern California Edison. There's confusion on, hey, if you're using their lines, why do we need you at all? Why aren't they procuring renewable energy? I don't work for them. I'm not on their board, so I can't answer that question, but I can tell you they're not doing it, and we are. So here is your available opportunity. I think another pitfall is more about abundance of renewable energy, which I think is kind of beyond just our agency, but I think that's a market problem, is making sure that we have an abundance of energy available, at all times of the year. Like that's something that could be a challenge, right? Like, hey, we've already seen over the last couple of years, we've had rolling blackouts, impacts on the grid because we need a scale infrastructure to move forward towards the movement of 100% renewable energy. Whether we want to move everyone driving an EV, we're going to have to make sure we have the infrastructure to implement those things. So I think the pitfalls are infrastructure, but I think our students and our entrepreneurs here are part of the solution because they can be part of, as I said earlier, getting the capital, investing, building these businesses, scaling the abundance of energy we have by getting projects off the ground.
Yeah, I guess for me, pitfalls would also be like organizationally, yes. Bringing everybody, to the table, the education piece, like you were mentioning, and brand awareness. I mean, that's what you're addressing.
Sure.
It's like Edison is for the local market here, and for our audience, Edison is like the one company that everybody's been using since, I don't know what year, over 100 years, right? So it's like their brand name is something, well, they've relied on it for that long, and so why wouldn't they, right? So
Exactly.
that then becomes a difficult sort of conversation to have, when you're building a brand like you are, and you don't necessarily want to compete because that's not a competition.
Well, and I would say to the psychological nature of where we're
Right.
having this conversation, I think humans want things that are simple, and
Yes.
easy to understand.
Yes.
And there's nothing more complex than community choice aggregation. It is really something that you have to take time to try to understand and look at the nuance of it. And I think it's just hard to adopt something that feels different because it's also change, and we're sort of change averse as humans. So
That on
just-
top of it.
Yeah.
So you have complexity and you have change.
Exactly. And
That-
so to just say something that we're going to make this a simple process and it's easy, it's like, it can't be that. It has to be something else,
Yeah.
so you can't
Yeah.
you can't just go into it. But I think what we do offer is the hyper localization of our support system. We are on the ground having conversations with community members. We are embedded in these communities, as Gabe was alluding to, unlike SCE, which has what, 50 million customers. We only have 175,000. So we can give you a personal touch. We get phone calls from customers at SCE because they can't get a hold of SCE. So they try to get a hold of us, and then we'll try to figure it out. So it's trying to
That's
just
sweet.
shift their thought process to say, we are going to help you. You don't have to understand the complexity, just understand we're going to help the planet. We're going to be here to support you.
And so maybe there you have your simplicity, right? So
Yeah.
it is like, you know, taking care and providing customer service
Mhm.
on a personal level, which
Takes away the need to understand electrons coming to
I
houses.
think
and how
nobody
it's working.
is going to, like,
Yeah.
they're not,
Right.
anywhere. So maybe it is, yeah, maybe it's time to like sit down and draw one diagram that like summarizes the
Like
whole
that
thing.
visual that Gabe had earlier.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
the
like,
first
here's one
one.
thing, here's second thing, here's
Third.
third.
Yeah.
We're done.
That first one,
Yeah,
that
we,
was
we
good.
try to simplify it, but like to our audience here, I'm like, I think the staff at CCAs, what we do is we navigate all the complexities so you can just flip a switch and have clean, renewable energy. Like literally, that's what we're doing. We're simplifying a complex process to allow you to have renewable energy and ultimately, you know, save our planet, address climate change, and all these things that I think are very important to folks.
Yeah, I mean, you're also contributing phenomenally to the SDGs by the
Yeah.
United Nations, right?
Mhm.
And I'll just mention workforce retraining is really important
That's good.
because it's real people that have oil and gas jobs right now. And
Yes.
it's an under area that we are
Yeah.
very focused on. It's looking at the retraining needs as we, as a world, transition to renewable energy. It's pretty much going that way anyway, as it gets more affordable. But we don't want to leave anybody behind.
Absolutely.
That's really,
Yeah,
and
and
we can do that
yeah.
on a local level.
So you're doing that already? You're retraining people?
Well, what we're doing is we're connecting with our community colleges, especially who have certification and workforce training, and our universities, and asking them what they're doing, where they need help, what needs to be communicated, how we can support that. And we think that's really important. And we're able to do that because we're right here.
Yeah, so is your university offering any kind of training around sustainability or energy at this stage?
So, I mean, we have sustainability, which is why we're doing the series, right? Is like, it's absolutely interconnected with everything that we do. So it's in the MBA for sure. It's in the DBA as a whole systems approach and leadership.
Mhm.
It is in the computer science. There's actually no place where it's not. It's in the
That's beautiful.
psychology from an eco-psychology perspective and a whole, I can call it a whole person, whole systems psychology, right? So that's really in the end what transpersonal is, because it addresses both of those elements
Sure.
all the way. And there is no way you can't, I mean, you can't take out sustainability. I mean, then we are talking about regenerative economies, right?
Yes.
That's really the key point here. And regenerative economies is like, it seems like that's going one step further, but essentially that's the only way to be sustainable. Because if you're not reinvesting in this way, then, you know, okay, you're stopping growth. Yes. Okay, this is a predicament of a capitalistic structure, is that there always needs to be more growth, but then that is not the truth if we're not regenerating, because if we're regenerating, we can have growth. Just it doesn't look the same. Because, you know, it's based on regeneration. But if we don't do that, then we're not sustainable, and we end up driving ourselves into nothingness. So yeah, so everything that we do at Sophia is connected to that. There's no way to take it out, the way I see it.
Well, I know we love that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think this slide kind of reiterates a lot of things I've already stated, but I'm a big believer as an investor, as a business owner myself. Like I fundamentally believe that entrepreneurship can lead or be a critical component of the transition to renewable energy. And we're already seeing evidence of that. Like US companies like Tesla have thrived by harnessing renewable energy sources and creating scalable, profitable models to do that. What I'm a big fan of, coming from my background in the legislature, is what we've carved out, which are like regulatory incentives to position companies as leaders in the energy transition. So this could be, rebates, discounts, tax breaks, depending on like what kind of capital investments they're making. Like for me, for an example, I own a co-working facility in downtown Atlanta, right? And specifically, we were able to get kickbacks and tax breaks by, adding solar to the building, adding battery storage to the building, and completely, powering all our facilities through like renewable clean energy sources. So there's opportunities for that. And really what I thought was powerful for that, I mean, the savings we had from that, just from the kickbacks from regulatory incentives, was enough to hire 2 full-time employees. So like from a business standpoint, there is not just only the social and the, climate advantage to doing cleaner, there's also a financial incentive to it. So it is a kind of win to be pro, ESG and like renewables is like, it's a win for all business owners. And then a last thing I have one here is, again, like as you can see, there's a theme. I'm encouraging you guys to go start up companies and, do a lot of things. Like I'm putting a lot on you guys here, but the growth of startups in solar energy and battery storage is an example of the vital role of entrepreneurship in shaping the energy landscape, something that even I took advantage of, and you easily can do too.
Yeah, I think all of this is crucial. And I mean, at the beginning, Tesla had such a hard time, with the solar panels, with their electric batteries, and then everybody jumped on board and took their designs and made it there. So there is an element here that entrepreneurship also means having the grit to stay with something that might not be ideal at the beginning, but then, where you have, I guess you have to be somewhat visionary, or, be guided by, being clear about where things are heading. And so I really like the fact that you're encouraging our audience to,
Of course.
to, go out and really push the limit on here.
Absolutely. Yeah. The world is your canvas. You can do what you choose with it. Yeah. I'm a big believer in that.
Yeah, we love that. Even if your parents tell you that you should be doing something else.
Yeah, pretty much. Don't listen to your parents. No, I'm just kidding. I never said that. Hopefully my kid isn't watching.
Oh.
No, that's really great. So like high level, like what are the opportunities here? One, we highlight international business can partner with CCAs to provide technology, service, and financing for local renewable energy projects. As an agency, we can't do it all on our own. We need partners. So as I said, it's going to take us as an agency, our local governments, and our business community to really move that pendulum all the way towards 100% carbon-free environment. Also, as I've reiterated a few times, growth in battery storage, grid management, and energy efficiency solutions. Those are the type of businesses I encourage investments, because I think they'll be your market share will be huge, and you'll have a lot of customers that want to invest in that because we need it. It's such a vital, important infrastructure for us. And then I think something that could be an opportunity is international collaborations with CCAs, offering foreign companies the chance to expand market presence. So maybe even over here in the US, we've been very successful in the implementation of CCAs. We could take those learnings and help build that infrastructure in, China or any other country. And then something I think is incredibly important here is international business can meet local demand while contributing to the global renewable energy transition by aligning with community-driven initiatives. So I am a big believer, and you've kind of, national government can set forth policies, but it's really the folks on the ground that kind of build up the infrastructure, starting with, a CCA, also partner with a local utility, because you need the infrastructure, you need people who are going to prioritize the renewable energy investments. And I think from an economic standpoint, as the demand grows for renewable energy, I think the amount of projects could go online because there'll be more capital investment, which I hypothesize can drive down costs where renewable energy can be even more cost efficient. So I think as time passes, renewables will be even more accessible, which I think long-term could drive down costs of EVs and so many other market factors that I think would be incredibly important to shaping our economy.
Yeah, although, yeah, that's created problems already in the European
Yeah.
economy that having, what was that?
I think that was the last, but I don't know.
Was that the last
No, I think
slide?
there's two more, but anyways, I want to open it up for questions.
Well, you wanted more questions? I have a question.
Oh,
How do you deal with greenwashing?
oh my gosh. That's a tough question.
I'm
We don't
sorry.
greenwash at all at OCPA. So that's how we deal with it. We don't do it. But I'm going to hand that off to you. Jen.
Oh, that was.
No, I think it's kind of going back to the conversation we were having about nuclear, where you're having to bring together a lot of different opportunities to get a full renewable package at this
Yeah.
point. So we are by far not perfect. This is a stair-stepped model. We are on our way to continued success. So, we will have detractors out there that will say we're using, source energy, but everybody's using standard source energy as it goes onto the grid. I think what we are trying to do is stay with the message that we are working toward creating more green energy and putting that onto the grid to essentially green the grid for everyone. So we can get things poked at us all the time and have detractors, but what we'd like to say is that we're not perfect, but we are on our way to getting better every single day about procuring energy. The more that we do it, the more energy projects we can get online, the more customers we can get to accept the green energy that we're producing. It will only get better.
I'll just throw in what she's saying about us being a public agency. Our meetings are recorded. We are transparent. It's much different than a private agency who doesn't have to share what they're doing. Local elected officials elected by the people
I see.
making our decisions for us.
Absolutely.
So that makes a big difference in public.
And all of our power content is published, is communicated to all of our customers every single year. So they are very aware. We are not hiding anything, as Linda's alluding to.
Sure.
We're very publicly transparent, which is another great benefit of community power. So yeah, we're not hiding anything. We want everybody to know where we are.
Yeah. And that information isn't just accessibility, isn't only on our website, that's accessible on the state website. So it's in multiple sources for verification.
And it makes actually the user almost like a part owner, right? From that concept that this is really what it is, like you're involved in it versus
Sure.
not having that information usually because you're not in it. Do you have a question?
Yes, what is your view on development of hydrogen energy?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
We haven't talked about that.
yeah, so like as an agency, we don't have, to my knowledge, a formal position on hydroelectric, do we?
We do not.
Yes. Okay.
But it's sort of in the same bucket, and I'll let Linda jump in, but it is also very controversial as the students are surely aware.
Sure.
But it is under consideration. It is, again, another tool in the toolbox to continue getting us toward fully renewable energy. There are they have it on a color spectrum. So there is green hydrogen that we are obviously more supportive of than we are of some of the other colors. But Linda knows kind of a deep dive about it, but it is, again, another tool in the toolbox that I think we should be considering and having conversations about.
She said that pretty well.
Yes.
I will say that there are some things we cannot decarbonize yet, like steel and cement. And we need something like hydrogen or nuclear but how we do it matters. Like she said, I think 95% of hydrogen produced today, is estimated to still be brown, made from fossil fuels rather than green. And so it's making sure that that's not being greenwashed and it actually is
Sure.
green hydrogen. And then the prices
Go up.
need to come down in order for it to
Okay.
be viable. But we've got to put the investment into researching it now, because like I said, we don't have answers to some of this yet. So.
Yeah, so some of the German car companies are betting on the hydrogen.
Mhm.
They've left the electric market. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah,
I wasn't sure about that one.
fuel cell. Yeah, it's.
You think it's a gamble, or do you think it's just because?
I wouldn't say I'm an expert on it,
Right.
but I just what I'm looking at and reading is, it's gonna be up to the public. If they accept.
Oh, if they accept the hydrogen or not?
Yeah.
Well, I would say hydrogen comes from water, which we are also struggling with here in California. So it's, it's a lot of things to consider. It's a great resource, but also we have another natural resource that is quite challenging to harness. So,
That's right.
yeah.
Yeah, for Southern California, that's certainly the case at the
It
moment.
is. And we both come from water, so we
Yeah.
we know all about the water wars and the challenges and the drought and the impact. And is that water clean or cannot contaminate? Then we have to treat the water. So there's a lot of variables,
Yep.
and then there's the whole conversation
Yeah,
of desalinization. So I was like,
Yeah.
there's just so much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
certainly. Okay.
That's right.
Mining a lot of
Yeah.
minerals.
For sure.
So we're looking at all those options.
Footprint is still big on that. I think that's what the bet is, for those car makers.
Okay.
Chris, how was that answer? Yeah?
Thank you.
Any more?
Great question.
One more, what actionable steps can an entrepreneur take today to start incorporating clean energy or renewable energy into their business model?
I would say reducing energy usage is probably the biggest step. If you don't have the opportunity to be getting renewable energy as your energy source, reducing your energy usage, especially during peak times, makes a big difference. And just trying to reduce your carbon footprint that way. But as Gabe was alluding to, advocating, volunteering, as Linda was saying, and getting people together and having conversations about the bigger community coming together as entrepreneurs and trying to move something forward.
Yeah. And I just want to add another piece just from an entrepreneurial sense here is, the way you kind of build your businesses is kind of like you have a goal. You have a top line goal of what you want to accomplish. Maybe in your business model, it's like, hey, we want to either reduce our utilization of energy or we want to increase accessibility to clean energy sources. So how do you get there? One, I would start looking at like what kind of projects already exist in your market. I think that's something that is very helpful. And then secondly, looking at those projects, then maybe see like, hey, is there any like regulatory pathways where, hey, if I'm starting a business, there's commitments from my government, a source that they're willing to, help in the capitalization if I do X project, right? So I can get like a rebate kickback. I think that's something that's really helpful. And then the last piece of this just comes down to really the power of community, which is our model.
Wow.
Our motto here at OCP is like, if you have a community, you find a regulatory pathway, you're able to get together a group of investors to capitalize something. I think that's the best way if you want to move in the energy market, like in China. Like I feel like that's the best pathway. And what I'll do is there's a lot of like resources that I can share you, just things I was researching that's available that I can share in a follow-up email, maybe to you, Dr. And like you could share that to the students.
Absolutely. Yeah, that
really
would
would.
be really interesting. And I think that in a lot of places, actually, this community model is going to be more and more important and more acceptable.
And there's precedences in China for this beyond not necessarily energy, but there's community water systems in
Yeah.
China, and that is
Absolutely.
modeled almost similarly to that of a CCA, local board of local officials,
Yeah.
community adherents, and they
Yeah.
engage and they set their rates and, for water. So kind of almost similar, just put a focus on energy.
Yeah, that's why I said that. I think
Yeah.
I think it's actually there. The US has a bigger problem in getting, this is sort of ideological acceptance in that way. Whereas I think other places are probably a little bit further ahead if they're willing, to go there. The conversation might slightly be different. I say like a Switzerland where they vote on every little thing, right? The normal citizen may not like the idea of renewables because they don't like those things like in the wind blocking their view and whatever not, right? No, seriously,
This is so
it's like
true.
because
This is so true.
they're voting on that at that level
Correct.
already all the time. So then, the question becomes is like, okay, how do you make that nicer? Well, okay, solar panels, okay, so the conversation's already there. So I think that approach will work for a lot of markets and is actually amazing that you guys have pulled it through here. I want to say that.
It gets back what it's a win-win conversation, right?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times people just don't understand. I mean, in the United States, Texas is the #1 producer of wind because it's cheap there, because they have great West Texas wind. It just makes financial sense for them to do that. So listening when you're out there talking about it, not only talking about renewable energy, but listening to what people's challenges are, and then being able to come back and say, well, here's the win-win for you, I think is really.
Well,
important.
I agree. And, the state has a certain income that also comes from these types of energies, right? Let's say like for us here, Long Beach, where, we have, the oil rigs that everybody complains about, that the oil rigs are there. But the moment they say, okay, let's take away the oil rigs out, oops, we have a whole income that's missing now for the community. So what are we gonna do to supplement that income? So I mean, that's kind of where you guys could come in and say, let's put a really pretty windmill there. No. No, but then what are the solutions that could be provided there? A lot of conversations. So it is actually also income for local and state that comes from that pocket. It can't be underestimated. Okay, Chris, any more?
I think there's one more.
Okay.
I would say sentence, but I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite understand the question. Like, I'm willing to volunteer and join the community. We recently launched a wind, solar, green electricity, hydrogen production project in China with
Oh.
an investment of approximately 8 billion RMB. So I hope you can provide guidance. I'm not sure what guidance.
Lots of guidance. There you go.
Sure.
I'd love to learn more.
Love to.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that is, so yes.
Sure.
Can you read the question again slowly?
I'm willing to volunteer and join the community. There's no question.
No, but okay, more, just read it one more time.
Okay, so I'm willing to volunteer and join the community. We recently launched a wind, solar, green electricity, hydrogen production project in China with an investment of approximately 8 billion RMB.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay, so here's a suggestion. Send the information. We'll be happy to connect the dots.
Absolutely.
Sure. So if you go to the next slide, it has my email if anyone wants to
There.
ask. Yeah, there you go. Ask additional questions. I think that's one that I can get a wonderful answer to you via email. So
Yeah, and that's actually, that question, I would also say that's a bigger project, which would be really fun
Dive into, yeah.
to dive into.
It's a great example though of what we're talking about, green hydrogen.
Yeah.
That they have wind and solar connected to a hydrogen
Yes,
plant. So we'd love to know more about it.
yeah.
it's exciting.
It is. It's really exciting. So thank you for sharing that.
No, thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for all the questions, really awesome questions and comments. And if there's ideas, feel free to reach out to Gabe or to Sophia or to me. Do they have my info? I don't even know. Yeah,
Global
Sophia,
College, yes,
Global
Sophia,
College. Yes.
Oh.
Yes, there you go. Right, to Global College, because I think what would be really interesting would be to have some projects that come out of these types of conversations, where we could, continue exploring and potentially build bridges.
Sure.
So, yeah, and I will noodle on that too,
That sounds wonderful.
because I think there is opportunity here. Yeah. Yeah, anything else, Chris? Are we good?
Yeah.
Well,
I think we're like almost on time, yeah.
sure. Well, if there aren't any questions, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to allow myself, my colleagues, Jackie Henderson and Linda Kramer, and myself the opportunity to speak with you today. Again, my email's on the screen, so I'm available to answer any of your questions. I feel motivated by your entrepreneurial spirit, and I hope like I can connect with you all one day and see like the cool work you're doing.